Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. Gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
Welcome. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back Randi Altshul. She has done some incredible things, and now she's on to another adventure, and we're going to hear about it. And we're going to keep you up to date on what she's done and where we're going in this vast universe. She's basically an idea person, so wait till you hear some of her ideas. And I would like to welcome Randi. Randi, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
The last time you had a disposable phone that you were bringing to market, what happened with that?
Well, we had a great product, and as with many great products, you have to have a lot of capital to make it happen. I had put everything I owned into the project and ran out of money at a certain point and needed some investors to come online. And unfortunately, the gentleman who was touted to be the power broker of power brokers turned out to be one of the most infamous white-collar criminals of the 20th century. Anyway, he ended up scamming the company, allegedly, of everything that it had, and the company went under, and I expanded on all the IP, and it's in the process right now of being developed, and we hope that it'll actually hit the market sometime, within the next 2 years.
Well, I'm kind of curious. You said you were able to pull out the patents. Did you go into bankruptcy, and was that part of the bankruptcy, or how does that work?
Well, actually, the company went into bankruptcy, fully filed bankruptcy, and because the intellectual property was secured by the bridge loan, so it was actually not a part of the bankruptcy proceeding itself because it was secured, so it made the only ones who could touch it. And we convinced the secured partners to subsequently release the IP and sell it to us for the new company in exchange for preferred stock in the new company so that we could develop this stuff further.
That's fantastic. There's so many things you got to remember and how to do it. But let's just backtrack 1 second.
Sure.
How did you come up to develop the disposable phone? Just a quick refresher. And what else have you got down the pipe?
Well, as with most of my ideas, they just pop into my head, and I don't know where they come from, but I'm just thankful that they keep coming up. Site for my conversation, and I was frustrated, so being, I guess, a toy inventor at heart, I just said, well, I want to make this thing cheap enough like a toy so I could throw it out the window. And that's where the idea came from, and it just kept escalating from there.
You also have under your belt the Huggable, wait a minute, it's not called a Huggable.
Lots of hugs.
Lots of hugs toy, and you want to show it to us because I think this is really exciting of where it's been in the world.
Sure. This is the
Wait, can you zoom out a little for her?
I could bring it up. I created this technology. I was awarded actually 2 patents on this for a huggable stuffed animal. It has the ability, you put your arms into its arms and you give everybody a hug, which is great. And what we did was we introduced this past year for the U.S. Olympics. And as you can see here, I don't know if you could get a close-up of it, this was the United States U.S. Olympic Committee for the Beijing Olympics. And it was great. We sold out, I think it was 1,100 units in 3.5 minutes on QVC alone. And it's been a lot of fun. So what we are actually putting together, let me back it up. Instead of just licensing products, which I've licensed a couple hundred over the past 20 years, I'm now positioning products as their own company, and this is part of the Lots of Hugs company, by which we plan on doing send a hug to somebody you love. So instead of sending just flowers, you could actually send a hug. And we have a whole line of different characters and everything. And from there, we're actually going to be developing a television show based off it for Lots of Hugs around the world. So it's a lot of different variables, but it's fun.
That is so exciting. Now, after your company went belly up, you found yourself in a position where you also lost everything.
Oh, yeah.
That's devastating, to lose everything that you've been looking, to build, to create, and your financial status. What happened next?
Well, it was more than just that. About 2 months after I hired this gentleman, and I use the word loosely, after I hired this person to run everything, my mom got diagnosed with a brain tumor. So obviously your priorities shift, and I'm thinking, this guy is a gift from God. He's going to run the company. I'm going to take care of my mom and take care of my dad, who also had cancer and a heart condition. 4 months later, I lose my mom, and I realized this guy was scamming the company. So got rid of my mom, my dad, and my company. So I've got to say, I don't wish bad on anybody, but hitting bottom is really probably the greatest thing that can happen to anybody in their life, because it's kind of hard to explain. Thank God I'm not a drinker or into drugs or anything, but if you have a clear head and you really hit bottom out, it's almost like a little voice says it to you inside. It's like, it's okay. Everything's going to be okay. It doesn't really matter. Just go forward. And that's what I did. I mean, right now, I own 6 different companies that I've started in numerous industries, including the medical field, the telecom field, the gift before. And it's just, you have to keep moving forward. And it takes time. I'm not saying anything happened overnight. You get through all that bad stuff, and then every year it just keeps getting better as long as you just keep moving forward and just making it happen.
Now, was there something that you kept saying to yourself going through this process that kind of lifted you up? I know we all hit bottom on certain things in different ways, but what were you doing? Were you saying affirmations? Were you giving yourself big hugs? What were you doing?
I'm a workaholic, so I can say I want to shoot myself, but you get through it and you say that you just keep moving forward. And I guess I'm nosy. I can't wait to see what tomorrow brings. So that is probably the catalyst to everything I do. I want to see the next story. I want to see the next chapter in my life open up, because I've learned over the years to kind of take a step back and really watch as things develop. And when you do that, you could actually see where this came from this and leads to that. And it's amazing how everything is connected, but you don't realize it when you're going through it. But once you start realizing how that is really how life happens and plays out.
You're also saying that during this process you had said something that you got a message from your mother.
Oh yeah. I don't know what your belief factor is. Everybody believes different things, but all I can tell you is my mom has visited me probably half a dozen times in my dreams. And on one of the dreams that she visited me, and it's very fleeting, but the reason I know the difference between a visit and a dream is dreams are fading. They fade away. But her visits, my God, I remember every detail of them, even though they only last I guess it was a few seconds. But every detail is there. And on one of the visits, I remember it was about 2003, as things were still difficult. I had actually filed because I was carrying $3 million in debt for the company. So after that time, things were just crazy. So I think it was 2003, if I'm not mistaken, it was one of my visits that my mom had made, and I was talking to her in a common way that we used to when I was a kid. We had, at that time, we had an unfinished basement, and I'd be working out or working down in the basement. Mom was always sitting on the stairs talking to me. And it was our quality time. She was my best friend. And during this dream, she visited me in the same way, and I remember asking her, am I ever going to be a success again? And she looked at me and smiled in that beautiful smile, like that knowing type of look. Didn't say anything, but I woke up instantly, and I knew this story that was in my head, and it became a book. And I knew the name, which is Sorry, You Can't Enter Heaven. I knew the beginning and the ending, and it was a little fuzzy on the details in between. But I wrote the whole thing out, and I knew it wasn't good enough to get to market. So it was one of those projects that kind of put on the back burner. But I knew I'd one day start developing it properly, and that's what I did with the help of an incredible writer. And again, this story was totally fate too, just the way things started to happen.
Off camera is that you're an idea person, you have no idea how things work, but yet you create all these marvelous gadgets and ideas and projects, and you said you surround yourself with the people who make them work.
I've always said my greatest asset is I don't know anything. And truly, I have no boundaries by having that ability to have no knowledge. And most people would say you're out of your mind, but it's true. If you have too much knowledge, you have boundaries, and I don't have that. So that makes it great. And what I do is a team that I trust with my life. And these people are a lot smarter than me and make me look really good. So when I create anything, whether it's a toy product, a technology product, a medical product, a book or anything, I just put it in the hands of the people that know how to execute, and we work to make it happen as a team.
How did your book happen to come into fruition?
It's a funny story. I had put it on the back burner for a little while and was focusing on a lot of other projects and companies that I was building. And clearly by accident, I was over somebody's house and I'm looking at a Costco circular. And that's why I say But anyway, I was reading a Costco circular, and in there was a story on a ghostwriter. Funny, a ghostwriter, and I got the story from a ghost. But anyway, there was a story about a ghostwriter by the name of Eva Schur. And I'm one of these people with a lot of chutzpah. I don't care who I call. So there was a telephone number there, and I called her. I just happened to luck out that she answered the phone, and she told me she never answers the phone, her own phone. So that was luck in itself. I told her about the story and what I wanted to do, and she loved the whole concept. And she said she couldn't get involved because she only works on a paying basis, and at the time I really make it on the back end. So she said that she knew the perfect person for me and sent out an email to both of us to introduce us. And this woman, her name is Kathleen Shaputos, and she is from Washington State, and she's a professional ghostwriter, author, and all that, and we hit it off from the onset. She sent me some samplings of her books, and I fell in love with her dialogue. And she was amazed because literally from the point we met, first we contracted the deal within a week, and we actually finished the book pre-editorial aspect, but we actually finished the book in 3 weeks, and she said it was like somebody else was writing it through her hands. It was just amazing to her because she took what I had, which I had written it in the first person, and she wrote it, I guess, in the third person. She repositioned it and editorialized it and made it come alive. And it was just a pleasure working with her. Working with a ghostwriter really helps to make a book real. Especially, she was a professional at it. Just like I would bring on an engineer for a telecommunications project, the relationship with her was priceless. I was really lucky. I had contacted one of my idols. His name is Buck Henry, who was the writer of The Graduate, Heaven Can Wait, and a lot of other incredible stories. And I asked him if he would be interested in reading the book. And at that point, it was a manuscript form. And he did me the honor of doing that, and he read it, he loved it, and he said that this should be a movie. And when you hear that kind of encouragement from a guy like that, I mean, you just say, we got to make this happen one way or another, and we were very fortunate we did.
You've got a lot of chutzpah in a lot of things, and I give you a lot of credit for that. Otherwise, where would you be?
Right.
The question is, did you know Buck Henry before, or you just cold called him?
No, I actually cold called him for another project that I wanted him to get involved with, and he loved the project. Get involved with at this stage of the game. Obviously, he could be very picky about the projects. And while on conversation with him, I told him about what the other projects I was doing, and that's where one thing led to the other.
Randi, you're involved in so many projects. You're like a juggler. You should really give yourself the juggler title.
You're right.
What are you doing now?
Well, as I was saying earlier, I've licensed a couple of hundred products around the world, and I've been very, very fortunate in a lot of different industries. And what I'm doing now, which is very interesting, and it came about purely by watching the environment that we're in right now. Most companies $100 million tomorrow, then drop $500,000 to make it happen today. And being an inventor/entrepreneur, I think that is the most incredible opportunity because it allows you to control most of the equity. and make this thing happen on a grand scale. So what I've been doing is I position products as their own companies, get investment, launch the product to a certain degree, just so it gets it some legs, so to speak, and then you sell the company to the highest bidder. And I'm doing that. I have a number of projects that are launching, matter of fact, in 2009. One is a non-invasive diabetes testing system. Obviously the Hugs company with lots of hugs, and we're hoping to do lots of hugs around the world as a television show, as well as send a hug to somebody you love, doing some internet projects, just a wide array of different things.
So where did you get your funding to get you back on your feet to start all over again?
Well, I stayed alive, and you're going to laugh at this, but I stayed alive and I did my meetings all day, and I was the nanny at night. I literally got a great reputation as taking care of newborns for moms that had a lot of money and could afford to have somebody pay somebody to leave at 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd wash up and do meetings the rest of the day, and I'd do that again at night, and that allowed me to survive. And then at the same time, I just brought on some investors for different projects, angel networks, different things like that, and have been very, very fortunate and gotten, it's interesting, people are saying the economy is so bad out there, and everything that's going on in banking and everything, but I'm seeing incredible interest and incredible opportunity right now because the high net worth individuals don't trust the market, and they're looking to things like this where they can get a bigger, bang for the buck. I mean, why in the stock exchange right now when you could own 20, 30, 40, 50% of a company that also is at risk? I'm not saying it's not, but at the end of the day, you're collecting more equity on it, and if it takes off, the sky's the limit. So I'm seeing a lot of opportunity out there right now, and I'm grateful for it.
Well, I've got an idea for a product. I don't want to manufacture it. I just want to have the idea, and I want to give it to, not give it, but I'd like to sell it really cheap so a lot of people can benefit from it. What would you suggest I do?
Well, you got to first really determine whether your idea is proprietary. Because most people, I would say 99% of the ideas that people throw at me saying, oh, I got this great new thing, is really a modification of something that exists. It's like another way of making Monopoly. And therefore, you really have nothing proprietary. Most people have a different marketing hook on something. But if you truly have something that's unique and novel, then there's a lot of different ways of going about it. Firstly, I'd recommend you filing a provisional patent, which you could do yourself. It only costs $100, and it protects you enough for what you need. Don't ever let an attorney tell you to go spend $10,000 because it's not worth it. Not at the early stages of things. $105 is all it costs from the U.S. Patent Office. You can do it yourself. So this gives you the patent pending. During that time, to the point where you have to file your real patent application. And if you do that, then you can start having maybe some illustrations done that depict www.inventing411.com. I give away a lot of free advice on doing this and free downloads of work for hire forms and partnership agreements that people can use so that, say you want to have an artist do a rendering, you have them sign a work for hire form. So this way you're paying them for that, and then they have no further rights into the project. So you're maintaining a paper trail, basically. And if you do that, then you start taking the project and you start saying, okay, what company do you think could benefit from this? And then you contact the companies, you sign whatever non-disclosures or disclosure agreements. Then maybe they might want to license it, and you take it from there.
Do you think people are really receptive to ideas? I know you had mentioned that you can start your own company. I don't want to get involved in starting the company. I just want to sell my idea.
It's not as easy as it was years ago, because as I said, the companies really just don't want to pioneer new things. So from my standpoint, being an entrepreneur, that's a benefit. I like doing it that way. If you About that, I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's just like anything else. If you want to be a model, if you want to be an actress, you got to hit the pavement and you've got to work for it. But there are companies that will license from you. It's just a matter of finding the right fit.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. I mean, I do it all the time. But as I said, it's also different from you going to a company and me going to a company, because quite frankly, I mean, not boasting of my ego, but I look good on paper because of all the products I've licensed around the world. So they know that if I'm contacting them on a particular project, there's going to be just contacts them out of the woodwork and may not have, even though may have a great project, but may not have a track record or anything that substantiates who they are and what their abilities are. It may be a little more difficult, but you know, that's a hurdle worth overcoming. Just because something's difficult doesn't mean you don't do it. Those are the greatest success stories, is when you just keep going when everybody else tells you no. And that's the stuff I love. Make it happen. Conceive it, believe it, achieve it. If you believe in it, then you're the only one that can make it happen.
How much do you attribute to your success to your education?
I have probably the strangest background that you'll ever find. I left school the first week of 7th grade, and I never looked back. They found out I had a pretty high IQ, I guess, back then. I was really smart when I was 12. I'm a disaster now. But I think the more I'm around people, the stupider I get. And I don't know if stupider is a word. But it rubs off on me, I guess, sometimes. But I guess from a frustration level. But I've been very fortunate. I got away with a lot of murder because I was given the opportunity to get private tutored in any subject I wanted by the Board of Education because they felt I had a very high aptitude for anything I wanted to do. And basically, give me the book, I'll get an A. I can't get spoon-fed information. And I just continued with that. I actually took a couple classes my senior year because a friend of mine convinced me, who was one of my tutors, convinced me to come back and take his classes. But it was very tough to adapt to getting, again, spoon-fed information, but I did it. And then I clept through, the college level examination program. I clept through some of the programs at school for college, but at that point I had no interest in going to college. I guess I was a free spirit. And during that time span, I was more into the martial arts than I was into anything else. Work for somebody. One of my brothers always tells the story. Apparently, now I don't remember this, but apparently when I was about 4 years old, people would say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I used to apparently always tell them that I wanted to be a millionaire, but I was going to use my brain to do it. I wasn't going to do it the way everybody else did. So I've been very lucky because I actually broke my first million when I was 26. So I've been very fortunate and lost everything by the time I was 40, but because of the disposable cell phone. But I'm in the process of getting it all back, which is a good thing.
It certainly is a good thing. Well, how old were you when you came up with your first patent?
First product that I did, probably when I was around 12 or 13 years old. I probably did, first projects then. But actually didn't get into the patenting phases until, I guess, the late 80s, early 90s. That's when I started getting heavily involved in that. Yes, a lot of the things were proprietary and could have been patented, but didn't actually go forward with that. Companies would do that type of thing, the companies that I would license things to. But it was not something I was delving into real heavily until I started expanding my own companies.
What's the first product that you brought to market? And how old were you when you did that? You said you were 12, but what was it that you brought to market?
Oh, first one brought to market were actually a bunch of games. Well, I don't even know if they actually hit market, but the first projects that I did from a business level were a bunch of games for the ABC Children's Television Network. But the first major thing that I did, which was in 85, 86, was I did the Miami Vice game, and that put me on the map. Subsequent to that, I was, because of that being the hottest property in the world at that time, I did the Miami Vice game, then I did the Power Ranger games, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games, the Simpsons games, Barbie's 30th birthday, a lot of toys and games associated with all the hottest licenses of the day. And that gave me an incredible credibility factor because those things make
forward. What advice would you give to an entrepreneur / idea person / inventor?
Never let the bastards get you down. Just keep moving forward. If you've got the dream, make it happen. It's as simple as that. It's your passion that makes things live. It's that simple.
We all get under stress, and when you're creating something and you're waiting for somebody to give you the go-ahead, okay, let's produce this, let's sell it. And there's a lot of stress. What do you do to stress out?
It's dealing with the people that gives me stress more than anything. But I don't let a project get to me because the projects that I'm showing right now I actually probably developed quite some time ago. I do 20 to 30 new projects a week, just from the concept stage. So I just keep moving forward and throw enough against the wall, something's going to stick. And when they stick, they'll catch up with me. It's that simple. So from that standpoint, I never let I think because of everything that I've been through over the past maybe 10 years, I don't, unless it's health related, it really doesn't matter. Just don't do that. It's not worth it.
It's a great attitude to have. In the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
I guess if you have a dream, make it happen. And right now, people are saying, oh my God, I've lost my job, I've lost this or I've lost that. But they have to realize on the big picture of things, sometimes that's the greatest catalyst to really put them where they're supposed to be. You know, most people become very complacent. They like that paycheck. They're afraid to make that start. But as I said, hitting bottom is the greatest thing in the world. It allows you to see different options. You know, when you're born, you don't have a sign on your face that says, well, I'm an engineer, or I'm an artist, or I'm a scientist, or I'm this. You could constantly recreate yourself, and that's the fun of it. That's the learning process. Constantly reinvent. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to talk to people, because there's opportunity everywhere. You can make money from anything. It's just do it. Don't wait for somebody to do something for you. Do it. That's all I can ever say.
Randi, thank you so much. It's been wonderful catching up with you, and it's always a delight having you here.
Well, I
Can't wait
you.
for the next time.
Thank you so much, too. I really enjoy it. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our next visit, and hopefully we have bigger and better things as well.
And thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, you can write us here at the Women's Connection, and Randi or I will be delighted to answer your questions. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.
Welcome to the Women's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise Switzen, your moderator. The Women's Connection is a program about personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
With me today is a woman who has been appointed by 4 mayors to address this issue, known as the quality of life issue here in New York for noise. I would like to welcome Dr. Arline Bronzaft.
Thank you.
How did you become so involved with 4 mayors to address this issue?
Well, first of all, I became involved in noise. I was noise on children whose classrooms were adjacent to an elevated train track. And I was able to look at their reading scores for several years and compare the reading scores of the children exposed to the noise to the children taking their classrooms on the quiet side of the building. And I found that children by the 6th grade were 1 year behind in reading when they were exposed to the elevated train noise. And this study was done over 30 years ago. This was a very dramatic finding. That meant that noise robbed children of their ability to learn. I was very fortunate to be able to persuade the Board of Education to put acoustical ceilings in the classrooms of the children adjacent to the noisy elevated tracks. And the Transit Authority was very cooperative in choosing that site to test out rubber-resilient rail pads to quiet the noise. When both abatement procedures were in place, a public official asked me to go back to the school to see if it helped. I was quite nervous about doing that, but went back to the school a couple of years later, looked at the reading scores before the abatements were in place and then after the abatements, and found that whereas the children were a year behind before the abatement, once the rooms were quieted, the children on both sides of the building, adjacent to the tracks on the quiet side, were reading at the same level. And that was a very dramatic finding. It meant that children were adversely affected by noise, their learning, and there's many studies to show that children's cognitive, language, and learning are indeed impeded by noise. But it also showed that if you did something about it, children would benefit. And it was the second part of the study that really stuck out in my mind, that we could do something. The effects on people when they live near airports, also wrote articles, wrote chapters in books, and I guess the mayors of the city of New York looked at this work and said maybe this individual could advise on noise. So I think it was my research that attracted the mayors, but there was something else. I just didn't use my research to get published articles and brownie points as a professor. I used my research to make a difference, to change the lives of people. And I guess the mayors of the city of New York wanted someone not only who was a college professor who did research, but someone who would use the findings of the studies to try to improve the lives of the people in the city. And that's why I think the 4 mayors have asked me to assist them.
Arline, you've accomplished so much. How would you define noise?
Noise is generally defined as unwanted sound that intrudes upon an individual's activities. It's sound that an individual does not want at the moment the person is either reading, thinking, watching television. And often that sound is not only unwanted, it comes in suddenly, it's uncontrollable, it's unpredictable, and it disrupts the activity in which the individual is engaged in.
Would you say there's been a rise in noise lately versus 400 years ago?
Noise has gone back to the time of the Romans. And I tell people that when our founding fathers were working on our papers and the Constitution in Philadelphia, they actually put dirt on the cobblestones outside the building so that they would not hear the wagons and the horses going over the cobblestones and not intrude upon their writing this very important document. I wish this story passed through more than my just telling it here, because it really told you something that individuals, in order to think, to produce, to write, they need some quiet. Now, as far as has it increased in the 20th century, of course it's increased in the 20th and now in the 21st, because we now have airplanes and cars, and we also have the railroad trains, and we also have more people. And I think people to intrude upon others, they don't keep it to themselves. So even though the modern inventions of the 20th and 21st century may have heightened the decibel levels surrounding us, I think what we also are facing today are people who are rude, impolite, and discourteous. And even though I think there are ways that technically we can lessen the din of cars and trains and airplanes, I don't know how well I could do with educating people about respecting other people's rights. If we could do that, many tenants living in buildings in the city of New York would not be complaining about noise.
What are the laws surrounding the quality of life issue concerning noise in an apartment building?
Well, first of all, we have the noise code in the city of New York, and I have to give kudos to the mayor, to the Department of Environmental Protection, and of course to the city council who passes laws in this city. And they did revise the noise code a year and a half ago in response to all the calls that come into 311. About a year and a half ago, 350,000 calls dealing with noise. So they did revise the tenant versus tenant noise, because in buildings, for the most part, you're dealing with a lease, and tenants are entitled to the quiet within their apartment. It's the warranty of habitability. As far as the noise code is concerned, if a person in a building were hearing the cooling unit from a building next door and called the Department of Environmental Protection, then an agent can come over, measure the decibel level, and look and see if the noise exceeds what is stated in the code. But we're not dealing with the noise from tenant to tenant. That's with the lease. Yes, if a tenant had a very loud party, you could call the police department, and the police would come over and tell the people who are making the noise to quiet down. Of course, after the police left, the level of sound would go up again. But we're really talking about neighbors playing loud music, and loud enough for the person to hear and intrude on the person's sleep. Or if the person does not put floor covering on the floor, and the heel in the morning when the person gets up for work. Those are the sounds we're talking about. And there we have to depend on leases. And yes, tenants, shareholders under the lease are entitled to the quiet enjoyment of their apartments. But again, it has to be reasonable. That's what comes up. If a grandchild is visiting a grandmother one Sunday and makes a little noise that day, and that child doesn't come over maybe once every 4 or 5 months, it may be unreasonable to make a fuss over that sound. But it's unreasonable to be intruded upon every night with loud music, banging, walking across the floor, screams and shouts. This would be unreasonable, and the law does speak to the unreasonableness of behavior.
That's fantastic, because you've just addressed a zillion questions I've had. What can somebody do if they have all these problems?
I complimented our founding fathers, and compliment them particularly since they gave us the Bill of Rights, but they failed in one other area. They didn't give us a Bill of Responsibilities. With rights come responsibilities, and to live rights of other people. So for that, we have to turn to the lease. Now, if indeed a neighbor was being intrusive beyond reasonableness, then the individuals could knock at the door next door and say, please. If the person is a caring, respectful individual, the person will say, I shouldn't have put the TV on that loudly, I'm sorry, and correct it. Too often that doesn't happen. And so the next approach is to the managing agent or to the landlord. And it really behooves the landlord to do something about it, because the lease is between you and the landlord. It is not between you and the neighbor. And if that neighbor has been very noisy, then that neighbor is violating your rights, and it is the landlord that has to take the action against the neighbor or the managing agent and write and inform the individual about the noise. One thing I would suggest, though, for landlords and managing agents, it might be wise to periodically send out a notice throughout the entire building to all the shareholders, to all the renters, reminding them of the need to keep quiet at times, particularly at night, in respect to your neighbors. These are called prompts. In psychology, we use prompts to remind people to be respectful. Curb your dog. When you see that prompt in front of a nice flower bed, that tells you, okay, I should be cautious. So I would like to urge all landlords or managing agents listening to this program to try to just remind their tenants and remind their shareholders. And the next thing I'd like to say is to take the complaint seriously. In some independent research I've done, I found that the managing agents and landlords do not always take this complaint seriously. I must add, though, in the last few weeks, having to deal with some tenant problems, the landlords I've approached have been quite reasonable in responding, but they have to see it as their obligation. Now, do not say we're living in the city of New York, so you have to deal with noise. When you walk into your home, you are tuning out the sounds of the city. You are coming home to rest, to watch TV, to read, to converse. And you're closing your door expecting some quiet. That is a reasonable request. So don't say occasionally if the person has a party. Let me suggest to people, if you're going to have a party, it's going to be loud, invite your next door neighbor. How many times do you celebrate 90th birthday parties, as my neighbor did recently? So it's the reasonableness. Now, if the landlord does not respond, if the managing agent does not respond, then the tenant, they have to go to court. You do not have to hire an attorney. The housing court will provide legal advice to you. Your action will be against the landlord for not taking have proof. You have to have called up the superintendent to have listened to the noise, to verify it. Or you may have a neighbor on the other side that says, yes, I'm similarly bothered. You just can't walk into court and say, this neighbor is bothering me. So you have to have evidence, even when you approach the managing agent, when you approach the landlord, come in with some evidence, make your case, make sure it's a reasonable case, make sure you're not intruding on other people, but stand up for your rights. You're entitled to the
getting this evidence that you can present in like in a court of law.
There are acoustical engineers that have equipment that can be left in your apartment, and it could record. But you know what happens when you hire someone? It costs money. So it's going to be costly to get an acoustician to come and place the equipment to pick up the sounds at night. So there's a cost element here. And many people can't afford that and are reluctant to do it. Then also there's the question of the evening that you have the equipment, and then you've spent all this money and you don't have the evidence. I would suggest trying to find out from the neighbor on the other side, the neighbor above. Do it with maybe a note under the person's door, requesting whether they're bothered by some noise in the building. You can get some proof by asking the handyman, the superintendent, to just come in and listen to the sound. Sometimes that works. But I have to tell you that getting evidence adds something else to a person who's, if you have a person that's very noisy, very difficult, very problematic. I once called up a landlord to complain about someone, and he said, look, lady, this is New York City, tell the person to just get on with her life. I said, should I also tell that to your superintendent whom the individual attacked? Is it true that he is smoking in the hallways, and that's also a violation? What you may find very often with a person who really goes beyond with the noise, that person is a difficult shareholder in other ways. And so that when you bring up the issue of noise, you will probably find there are other ways that this person is disturbing the building, and this can complement your particular complaint.
How do you handle it when you know other tenants are bothered by the noise? They've pounded on the wall to make sure that they're quiet, but the thing of it is, they won't go to management, they won't go to the doorman, they won't go to the superintendent. How do you handle that?
That is a major problem. I'm going to use Obama's words. You become an organizer. You have to make the effort to get other people in the building together. I'm going to use another example of a building on East 80th Street in Manhattan, where a few people got together. They all were complaining about noise. They asked me to come to speak to the group. I did. I also did call their managing agent, and we got a note to all the tenants to try to keep quieter. Organizing, you have to do that. I know people don't like to do it. That's why so many people get away with being abusive. People are frightened. And I'm going to tell you a group of people that I come in contact with that are especially frightened. And those are single women living alone. They don't know how to go about organizing. They don't know how to get a coalition going. So I would make another suggestion. We have council members that live in our district. The council member is the closest person to city problems that we have. And we have some very good council people that responded. I would make a call to a council person. I would ask that person to help us. If I were an older person and there were a university nearby that had a law school, and I know that a number of these law schools do help senior citizens, I'd go and do that. So if you're not an organizer, learn how to defend yourself. We have to do that, because if we don't do it for ourselves, we're not going to be able to enlist other people to help us. So make the call to the council person. Make the call to the district manager of your community district. Visit a law school. Ask if there's some help for senior citizens. Try to be a little more assertive. And I think if more people in the city did that, then we'd find much more responsiveness from the landlords and the managing agent.
Calling 311 is one solution. Is there any way that you can make an emphasis without being a nuisance to 311?
Well, if it's a noisy air conditioner in the building next door, their 311 would forward the call to the Department of Environmental Protection. And from what I've heard, they've been very responsive in sending agents over to measure the sounds of the noisy cooling unit on the building next door, or if it's the bar next door or the restaurant. They've been quite good on that. And if it's in violation, those and they're going to have to pay a fee. But I think in terms of the police, they're not the individuals that you're going to get a response from with respect to tenant to tenant. It's just not going to work that way. You're going to have to get your landlord to move on it. And the ways I've suggested before have to be employed. Because if it's a noisy person, or if there are two very noisy tenants in the building, I know that other people are going to be upset. It's true, they individually might not. There is strength. And I'm going to quote again from Obama, but I don't have to do that, because all the way back when I first moved into my first rent-controlled apartment, in numbers there is strength, but again, call your council person. That's why the person is there. Go to the Senior Citizen Center. Try to get some help legally, particularly if you're older, you're entitled to it. And try to get someone, maybe a younger member of the family, to advocate on your behalf if you're older. Or if you feel there's someone that you know that can do it, turn to that person. Now, I hate to say on this program that if you're listening and you really need some help, I'm going to say it though. Call, I would help you.
What about barking dogs, or piano playing, or a harp being played? How can you control the noise? It's an infringement on your senses.
Well, let's take barking dogs. My daughter had a barking dog problem. Of course, she called the police before she called her mother, but then she decided to call her mother because her mother did a better job. So it ended up, though, I did get the police because the dog that was barking had been tied outside and left to. It was the dog owner that was being abusive of the dog, while it was also true that my daughter and son-in-law could not sleep. So in that case, we helped the dog. Dogs live in my building. I have a building with dogs. I have a dog on the floor in which I live. I never hear the dog. Yes, occasionally a dog will bark when someone comes in, but good tenants, good shareholders also know that dogs are not to be barking constantly. And I think if a dog is barking way beyond, I'd look to how good the owner of that dog is. So dog barking, a minimal, but the people I know that own dogs in my building take care of their dogs, and we don't hear them, so that should not be a problem. Now, what about music? Oh, is the child next door taking some lessons? Occasionally, if it's from 3 to 4, you may have to deal with it. But you should not have a person living next door to you who's using her apartment as a place to practice, as a business. Now, that is not allowed. So I think you have to look into the situation, try to find out if it's something that'll be a case. And if it's continuous, then you're going to have to look to some sound abatement. I wish that the people who are putting up these new buildings in the city of New York are paying attention to insulation. In England, after the war, the British had to put up their apartment buildings very quickly, and they did not insulate them well. So if you want to talk about noise complaints, look at some of the literature after the Second World War and listen to the complaints of the people living in London who could hear their next-door neighbors having sex and next-door neighbors using the bathroom. So one of the things I'd also like to mention, in terms of construction, there are materials to be used. In fact, Owens Corning on its website has a list of quiet products that people could purchase in constructing homes, buildings, that would make life better for all people. So it's not just a matter of how do I get my neighbor to be quieter. Let's also try to be forward thinking and make sure that when we put up our buildings, we use materials that do not allow the transmission of sound from one room to another. So lots of horns outside, with buses passing, with trains overhead. We should also put in better windows. So I'm making a plea to the people involved in the construction industry, but more to the developers, because I think the engineers and the architects know that they could quiet the building, but in curbing costs, it's the developers that often go for the cheaper materials.
What if you have a neighbor that practices their instrument so loud that it infringes on your quality of life?
I would say it's the neighbors. If a neighbor is going to use the apartment to practice on an instrument, knowing that this may intrude on the people living next door, then it's the neighbor's obligation to create an environment where the sound will not be transmitted next door. So I do not believe it's the person living next door. I think you should go to a sound recording studio and you should practice in facilities that are designed for practicing music. That's one thing. But if you're going to be using it as part of your profession, then you're really using the apartment for professional purposes. And that apartment has not been built to deal with the sound that can be transmitted next door. So to me, it's the individual who's creating the sound that is responsible. Notice the word responsible. That is responsible not to intrude on other people. So I'd like to get this through. Yes, we have rights. People have a right to do a lot of things in their apartment, but they do not have the right to intrude on others, and it's their responsibility to refrain from doing that.
What effects can the noise have on you?
Noise creates stress, and of course stress can lead to physiological effects. Stress can affect our blood pressure, our heart, and there are studies that indicate that stress does indeed have this kind of effect upon our behavior, physiological behavior. But stress also changes us mentally, makes us angry. It can create rage, and sometimes that anger gets out of hand. We not only knock at the door of our neighbor, but we ask our landlord, who hasn't responded to two of my earlier requests to quiet the neighbor, we shout at the landlord, we scream. Noise does create aggression in individuals, making people very angry. And there are instances of people getting so angry that they have attacked their neighbors and physically have harmed them. I would suggest that in the city of New York, it's raising a voice. I can understand when the neighbor hasn't listened. But I also know that the rage and anger that's in you, that you're trying to control, might affect you even more physiologically. And I would really urge landlords and managing agents and boards of directors to try to understand that people are so angry and so upset, so frustrated, that you're creating an unhealthy atmosphere in the building if you let the noise get out of hand. So I'm not suggesting that the neighbor may physically attack, though these things have happened. What I'm saying is you do not want people to have such anger, such frustration, such distress. This isn't healthy. And if you want to run a building where neighbors are living together harmoniously, I would try to respond to the complaint.
This is fantastic. Arline, I can't tell you how excited I am about this. In the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that noise affects health. Noise affects quality of life. And the World Health Organization has stated that noise does impact on quality of life. And that means that people have the right to some quiet in their lives. People have a right to watch television, to read, to converse, to rest. This is what makes quality of life. We have found that noise does affect health. The best literature is in the cardiovascular area, where noise has been found to cause vascular diseases. Actually, a recent study coming out of Switzen has linked noise to heart attacks. Now, I'm going to say that just very slowly again. A recent study. That needs further validation. But what doesn't need further validation is the fact that noise diminishes our quality of life. And we don't have to have symptoms of heart disease or breathing disease or high blood pressure to say our quality of life has been diminished. A good quality of life is not merely the absence of symptoms. It means being able to engage in activities in a way that you feel comfortable and less stressful. And the second thing I'd like to say is that people do have the right to quiet. We always talk to the noisemakers, and they say they have the right to make noise, but we also have the right to quiet. We're not being unreasonable. We're not saying silence, reasonable, quiet environment in which we can carry out our activities. And yes, this is possible in large cities. Yes, this is possible in the city of New York. And I also want people to understand that if they believe it's important to do that. Look what speaking out did to one young man in this country. He went from being an organizer to being president of the United States. Now, I'm not saying that anyone speaking out in noise is going to rise to that position, but speaking out will get you ahead. And you have to really believe that you have the right to a reasonable, quiet environment, particularly in your home, and do something about it.
Arline, thank you so much. I have enjoyed this program immensely, and I hope you have enjoyed and learned something about noise in the city of New York, and it helps you to improve your quality of life. If you have any questions, Arline or myself would be very happy to answer them. You can reach us here at the Women's Connection. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.
Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise. Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned?
And then you die. But with me, we're going to talk about life's a bitch and what you can do about your job. And with me is Andrea Kay, and some very fascinating points to keep in mind as you go through your workday. And I would like to welcome Andrea.
Thank you for having me, Barrie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us. How did you come up with the name of your book?
Well, my last book was called Life's a Bitch, and Then You Change Careers. And people really identified with that because it really is a little bit like that life can be very, very frustrating and difficult. But if you change careers, you can change everything in your life and, really make it something that you want and something that is more satisfying for you. So when I looked at what was going on in the world and all the emails that I get from my column and regarding my books, people were bitching a lot. They were complaining about not just their careers not working out, but the things that were going on at work and the lack of control that they felt. So I thought, you know what? Work's a bitch also, but you can work it out. And so to make it better. And people identified with that too, and even more so today.
Well, what do you find is the constant complaint that people have from the workforce?
Well, today, I think people feel as if they have no power and no control because they feel as if there are so many forces working against them. They feel as if they're working more, they're getting less. They are being asked to do more, and there are things that are being taken as if no matter what they do, their security is out the window. They just are feeling totally insecure and fearful about what to do so that they can be secure. And that's the overriding sentiment and fear that I get from a lot of people in no matter what industry you're in these days, even healthcare, which is, a strong field.
How do you suggest people adjust to this complaint? I mean, not everybody can just quit their job and move on to something else, especially if you're over 40, which becomes pragmatic because of the fact that once you hit that magic number of 40, everybody feels dispensable. And basically in today's world, you are, unfortunately.
Well, first of all, you have to look at how things are, not the way you think they should be. And if you have in your mind that I should be feeling secure and that I will have a job for life, well, you need to shift that because that is just not the way it is. And if you hold on to that, then you will always be focusing on staying secure instead of staying valuable. So the new mindset, or it's a mindset that I've been preaching for over 20 years, which is look at how to stay valuable, not secure. And if you have that mindset, then you are always thinking about what do I need to do to keep myself valuable for the company that I'm in, the field I'm in? What are the trends that are going on out in the world that affect the things that I do? And you need to think, especially today, about things like, how do I help my company keep its doors open? How do I help my company deal with the issues that are going on that are affecting customer loyalty or affecting their business? So look company move beyond that fearful state that they're in, and that will make you more valuable. So it's really a matter, first of all, of a mindset and not buying into, wow, I'm over 40 and I'm going to be the first one to go. You really have to think about what you have as a 40-plus person worker, not what you lack. And again, in this general state of fear, everybody goes into that fear state and they start worrying about, well, here's what's going to happen to me and I'll be out on the street or I'll be fired because I'm older. Not necessarily so. If you position yourself as valuable, okay, that's the key.
What are the best places to find future trends? Are there books, internet sites, to find what's going on in whatever field you're in?
The best place to what I call fine-tune your radar is, first of all, pick up the news. You know, I read the New York Times every day, and I sit there with a piece of paper, and I get ideas, and I start seeing a sense of where the world is going just by seeing what is happening, what people are complaining about, what problems they're facing that no conversations about what people are griping about, what they're dealing with. You will start seeing trends, and then you can say, well, how does that trend affect what I do? I mean, look at the general trends in the world. The green movement, how is that going to affect my industry? How does the increase in population growth affect my industry? How does technology, these are questions that you can ask yourself. How does the overall technology issues, the growth of technology, cultural, environmental issues, how are those affecting me? Yes, there are also websites, and in my other book that I mentioned, Life's a Bitch and Then You Change Careers, I have a list of those websites that you can go to. But if you just look at what's happening in your own community and the world overall, you will start seeing these trends. And in my job, and in my company or my field.
There's two sets of people. There's the blue-collar worker, and then there's the white-collar worker. How does the blue-collar worker adjust to stuff like this as far as moving ahead or staying secure?
Well, I don't think there's a whole lot of difference in how you position this in your head. You have to see yourself as somebody who, whether you're blue collar, whether you're an administrative assistant, or you're the CEO of a company, you need to think, what is it that I do that matters? You have to think through how what you do on a daily basis helps this company be more efficient, make more money, cut costs. So how does what you do, every job, that's what you are doing. You are there to solve a problem. I don't care what level you're at. So first of all, you need to think about what is the problem that I help my company solve in the job, and then how can I do that more efficiently? What ideas do I have that can contribute to making this company more efficient, more profitable? That having a conversation and saying, you know, I've noticed that when our customers call in or when I deal with this issue, here's where we have a little inefficiency. Here's what I'd like to do. So don't just go with the problem, come up with the solution. I don't care what level you're at, you can offer those kinds of solutions. And again, what does that do? It makes you more valuable.
How do you handle a situation when you have a boss who is not receptive to your suggestions, comments, thoughts, because they are also paralyzed in their fear of how to
anybody to do something. You can only influence. And that's the goal that you go into a conversation like this with, which is to help them be open to seeing a different way, to being more effective, profitable, efficient, whatever. So think, I am going to try to influence to help this person. Can't force them. All you can do is present the idea. And if they're not open to it, well, they're not open to it. So you can't force it, and so don't get frustrated about it, but accept it. Say, you know, I did my best, because I'll tell you, if you don't offer the ideas and the thoughts and the observations that you have, you feel worse about your work. And I talk a lot about this in this book. I have a whole chapter on greatness and feeling like your work matters. And the more that you think about the things that can make a difference, and the more you offer them, the more you will feel good about your work, but you can't force people to embrace them if they're not willing to.
If you're outsourced, is there any kind of a lifeboat that one can hang on to? Because every part of the country is different as far as the services that are provided by the county.
Well, first of all, let yourself feel what you need to go through, okay? It's not an easy thing to lose your job. and know that this is not the end of the world. You have to have faith that you're going to be okay, because you will. But let yourself go through the process of grief, and that's really what it is. It's a loss. It's an unexpected loss, and there's potentially lots of fear around that. And that is okay, and you need to let yourself talk to friends, talk to a service, get some help, because there are people that can help you. And know that people may tell you, oh, get over it. You can get over it. And you will, but still let yourself go through what you need to go through. Now, once you do that, then I want you to really realize that you need to then focus on what it is that you can go out there and offer, and maybe see yourself not as a job title anymore, but a body of time to be putting that kind of effort into it. You think through, what are my strengths? What are the skills that I can pick up, pack up, and take with me to another employer? But get rid of the mindset of a title and think of yourself in terms of these skills, this body of knowledge, and believe that you have that to offer to somebody, and that somebody's going to want it. And it's not just what you offer in terms of skills. It's your ethics, it's your work ethic rather, it's your commitment to being there. And get support and get help, because everybody needs that. And don't blame yourself for what has happened to you, because it's happening to people. Some of the best people I know are losing their jobs, and it's not about you, but it is going to be for you and your responsibility to, once you give yourself permission to go through what you need to go through, get support, to get back on your feet and be positive about yourself when you do talk to employers about what you have to offer. Because think about it, somebody else prior knew that you were valuable, and somebody else will see that in you as well.
Most of the jobs that are going to be around in 5 years, 10 years, haven't even been considered yet or even thought of. So I guess this goes back to analyzing trends and what you can do and how you can fit in on the future of America. Mm-hmm. Moving forward, what would you say is the second largest complaint that you get from people?
Well, when it comes to what you were just talking about, it's the, how do I figure out what to do if I don't know what the future is going to be? How do I figure out how to get rid of that I am a whatever, the title thing, okay? Because as you just said, some of these titles, many of these titles don't even exist. We don't even know what they are, and they're called different things in different companies, in different industries. So the desire, most people have this desire to know exactly what I should call myself and what's the direct path to get there. That's probably the second biggest issue that I hear. And so if you can embrace, and I know this is not easy, but if you not knowing exactly how it's going to turn out, that will help you enormously. Get rid of that need to know exactly how it's going to turn out, because we don't know. The best thing you can do is to know yourself well. Again, go back and know what are the top 6 strengths, the things that you can actually do that somebody will find value in. And by that I mean, are you a good problem solver? Are you a good writer? Do you analyze? What do you analyze? Are you somebody who's good at coordinating? What do you coordinate? What are those top 6 things that you, in terms of skills, not title? And that will help you then when you start looking at what are the needs, the shifting, changing needs of the world. Then you can say, okay, I can see how my skills fit into that. And it also makes you able to then move with more ease as that changes. So that's the key to getting through this and enjoying it. And I'll tell you, it's really, if you can embrace that ambiguity, something you're experiencing as you go through it. It's challenging, and you see how you are building your career not depending on things to come to you, but you're thinking, I see how I might fit in. I need to go get a course in that so I can update my skills in that area, or whatever it is.
With every great change in our economic system, people seem to turn back to spirituality or the religion if they have one, or, they change internally. How do you see this happening now?
Well, I think that is a really important point that you bring up, and something that can help anchor you at this time. One of the things that I've talked a little bit about is the importance of having control over your emotion. Because if you allow this emotion of fear control you, you will run into walls and you will not move forward as you need to. So I personally do this. It's not an easy thing to do, but every day I sit, if you're not necessarily a religious person, or you're trying to figure out how can I just maintain some calm and some peace in me that will help me get through this, is to sit quietly for a couple minutes every day and just try to get your mind centered and feel calm inside. If you can get to that place and kind of set the seconds, it can help you maintain that tone throughout the day, and then when you start feeling panicked, be able to go back to that familiar place. That will help you say, brain, heart, you don't need to be out of control, you don't need to be fearful, but you are in control of this self, and I want to be in that place so that I can make reasonable decisions based not on fear, but based on choice of what I want. Now, if you, there are all kinds of groups, people, other religious entities or people, associations that can support you as well. And I think this is a great time to join a job search group, maybe through a church, a synagogue, or another association. Look for groups of people that don't just sit around and gripe, who might be associated through one of these entities that I mentioned, but look for people who are giving an opportunity to kind of gripe out loud, but then to say, okay, what do we need to do? What can you do to move forward? Or that will give you feedback on maybe what's getting in your way. So reach out. Don't just sit at home worrying and being fearful, but definitely reach out and spend some time inside and looking inside and calming yourself as well.
I remember way back when we had another downturn in our economy, I asked somebody to come work with me at a charity, and her comment was, I don't have time, I've got to find a job. And I thought, okay, you don't have time to help somebody less fortunate than you. I wish you a lot of luck. Today will enhance you or just make you feel good.
You said it. It will enhance your feelings about yourself when you reach out and give to people. And what I've found is that is not only the key, but when you are among other people who need help, and you meet other people who are just like you giving help, who you can network with. So that's an additional benefit, but that's not the reason to do it. You are reaching out. You know, this whole concept of networking is not just about asking for help, but it's supporting other people. And by giving people who are in need at a time when you are in need is extremely fulfilling and helps fill a void many times in you. I highly recommend it.
What do you think of the social networking that's going on right now? You've got Facebook, which is so popular. You've got LinkedIn, you've got Plaxo, you've got Twitter. Can that help you or hinder you?
Well, hey, this is going to be the solution, to my problem of finding a new job. it's no different really than building a network in real time with real people. What it is, just think of it as a tool, not your savior. It's a tool to be able to connect with people. Do not spend your whole day sitting there writing to people and telling them what you're doing. And that's the downside of it, is I think it can be very time consuming and take you away from meaningful, productive conversations and activities. That's not a strategy. Just like sending your resume out to a bunch of companies is not a strategy. It's one piece of the strategy. Use it wisely, use it strategically. Don't think it's going to be the solution to finding your job. It's just one path, because if you're putting out word to this person and that person and then talking to that person, it's a path, it's a vehicle, but it's not the solution.
Our economy changing, and people questioning their values today, like in a couple, one spouse or even both spouses outsourced. Mm-hmm. How do you cope in a situation like that? Is that good? Do you spend time together? Do you spend time separately so you don't get on each other's nerves? Or how do you help one another?
This is a time when your relationship can either be weakened or strengthened, and I would advocate this is a time to strengthen it. But you have to do this. You have to talk. You have to have conversation. You have to sit down and be realistic. And I mean, you need to sit down with your spouse and say, look, I'm hurting, I'm scared, I'm whatever. Cry. Use that person as a support for the situation. And say, you know, I'm worried. What are we going to do? How can we go through this together? Acknowledge that there's going to be time when we're frustrated because we can't live the life that we used to have because we've just lost an income. Talk about how this is going to affect you in your everyday life, if you have children and other aspects of your life, and really sit down and talk about that and then come up with a plan. But first, talk about it. Make a list. Get out the white pad with the pen and say, here's the things that I'm worried about, and now here's how we can adapt, shift, change, what we can spend less money on. So do it together as a couple. Don't let it divide you, let it unite you. And I have found that when you do that, when you go through these challenges together, it can be an empowering, I never used that word, but it's a great word, really. To help you prepare for other challenges that you will face later in life.
You have 6 steps in your book going from pissed off to powerful. What other one would you say is one of the most powerful ones that somebody can concentrate on developing?
I think the first step in my book, which I alluded to early on, is the most important and affects everything. And that is to understand that you are in charge of your choices. And by that, you have to, I mean this, you have and what you don't. And you have to start where things are, not where you think they should be. Because if you sit there and say every day, they should be responding to my emails, but they aren't, you're not starting where things are, you're starting where you think they should be. And as long as you stay in that should be state, you're not going to change your activity and what you do in response to that. If you shift, though, your thinking, which is, you know, this isn't a good strategy, and I must be doing something wrong, then you're looking at your behavior or your belief, and now you can shift your behavior. And that, going through anything in life, in particular though this time, which is to look at what you can change and what you can't, and what you can influence. And how can you influence it? By changing how you look at it.
Andrea, what do you suggest people prepare now that they can take for the rest of their lives, no matter what age they're at?
Okay, that's step 4 in my book. which is prepare for hurricanes, sinkholes, and mañana. And that means prepare for anything that you don't know is coming, because we don't know what is coming. Because you never know what is coming. And in that strategy are things like know why you matter, know how to talk about yourself, be always learning something new. I've got a list of all kinds of things in there. But if you're prepared for and have the mentality that, you know, I don't know what's coming, so I always need to be open to it, that will help you not only get through this, but get through and enjoy. As I said before, it's enjoyable when you feel more powerful and in control. And that is what will make you feel more powerful if you are prepared for
Website with great information. How can people contact you?
Go to www.andreakay.com. I have thousands of articles on there, and if you sign up for my newsletter, I'll send you that, and then you'll about trends.
Andrea, in the closing moments of the show, what would you like to leave the audience with?
Everybody has a set of skills. You have gifts that you can utilize that somebody will pay you for. The key is to know what those are so that who you're talking to knows what they are. But everybody has value. It's a matter of letting them know what those things are, being able to articulate it, and first, though, believing in yourself.
Thank you so much, Andrea Kay, for joining us and sharing with us so much knowledge about how to. For Andrea or myself, please write us here at The Woman's Connection. Look forward to hearing from you. Bye now.